CJ, Bobby McMann has been a topic of discussion for us and the pending UFA status. Where do things stand with him, the Leafs, the contract, potentially being traded? What's the latest with Bobby McMann?
Well, look, it's an either-or situation. If we get to March 7th, either he's been traded or he's been signed. I do think it's that simple in terms of, we're not going to be getting on the other side of the deadline, and the potential of him walking for nothing in the summer is on the table. And so that sets up a pretty big week here. It's obviously 7.5 days till deadline. And, at this point, I don't sense that there's any traction towards a deal, anything of that nature. It really doesn't seem like they've gotten too deep into things. But, the rubber is about to hit the road with where we're at close to the deadline. And I don't think the Leafs are going to extend themselves too far. I mean, what he and his agent might deem a fair deal isn't necessarily going to align with the Leafs side of things. And so, I think they're going to hammer through that in the next week. And if we get to next Wednesday, next Thursday, and there's just no deal to be made there, then we're going to be talking about him being traded because he is a valuable trade asset at this deadline.
Yeah, I would concur with that. And look, if you're looking at some of the speculation around Bobby McMann and what he might command, he might get $5 million on the open market as an unrestricted free agent. He's not getting $5 million from the Toronto Maple Leafs, regardless of the term. I mean, it's been projected 5 years, $5 million, somewhere around there. Maybe the AAV slightly comes down with the longer term. Toronto doesn't have the stomach for that. And, there's been a lot of talk that it's a game-by-game watch. If Toronto claws into the playoff mix, well, then they're going to sign Bobby McMann and Scott Laughton, and maybe no, it's not a game-by-game watch. That's the messaging that I'm getting pretty much on a day in and day out basis now with March 6th looming. They're waiting for teams to step up and make concrete, legit offers on McMann, on Laughton. Doesn't mean they're selling them, right? But that's how then you make a sound and educated comparison to, okay, all right, here's the market on Bobby McMann. If you're not getting a decent draft pick, or better yet, a defenseman, or maybe a futures package that you can work with, well, maybe you reconsider at that point. You go back to Bobby and say, okay, here's our last-ditch effort trying to extend you. But they're not watching game by game and worrying about the wins versus the losses and whether or not they kick into sell mode. That's not how they're operating.
So, guys, how is that connected to the letter from Keith Pelly to the fan base, which is, we will do anything to contend? Because you can't put things...
There was no date stamp on it, though.
Well, I'm saying you can't look at this microscopically with one game analysis, because if you looked at last night, they're not contending.
No.
So what the hell does that news?
But maybe they know that, Jeff, and maybe that's just again.
But then why the letter?
Well, it's to season ticket holders.
That's to season ticket holders. Yeah. And I happen to be a partial season ticket holder, so I read it early.
There
it was
you go.
interesting.
Oh,
the injuries and all of that stuff. Yeah, I saw
and 2 extra games in the future, and you're going to have access to
I'm going to pay
those.
for that. I'm thinking that's the case.
Something's coming.
Honestly, I do think, though, in fairness, it wasn't really about this year, because I'm constantly, as is CJ, reminded that they've had a plan in place for a long time. So that letter comes out, and it's more about, okay, don't panic, season ticket holders. We're coming back, and we're going to be stronger than ever next year. That's what it was more about.
Well, but that, I think, is important in terms of trying to figure out what the plan is. Because you could possibly lay out in front of any Leaf fan, or the 4 of us here at CJ at home, plan A is scored, stir, take it to the studs.
Right.
Plan B is retool, might take a couple of years. Plan C is just been it's an outlier, hasn't been a great year. Yes, we got to adjust a couple of things, but it's not going to be that significant, and we feel we can get back into the dance next year. Those are 3 different avenues that would,
what is the letter said, we'll share some things with you, but not others.
Yeah,
right.
We're not giving you our strategy.
Right, but we're going to know by opening night next year what their plan is. If Tree Living's back, Berube's back, the core is still here in a couple pieces.
How do you know? You can't know what that plan is, though, right? I mean, if one of those key players comes to you in the offseason, says, I'm not in for a retool, that's not what I signed up for. I'm just telling you up front now. So work with that as you want. We can work together, but I'm not invested in that. Well, then your position changes in a hurry.